Hey folks, today we're going to be using a pin loom to make basic cloth. Now this is our basic pin loom and we have worsted fabric, and as you can see here we're starting to put it in between the pins. This is our warp as far as weaving goes. Now if you'll see in the close-up there, you're putting it in between the last two pins. And this is how you're going to work your warp. You go up to the top, you skip over the first pin, capture the last two, come down, capture the last two, go back up, capture the last two, come down. And we're basically going to work this way across the entire board. And in this way, we create the warp for this small piece of woven cloth. And as you can see, once you have the pattern for covering the pins where you're skipping the first one and wrapping the final two, you just repeat that all the way. Now we're here at the end, and watch carefully as we go over how to do the last two. And then you push it right there, right after the first one. And now we're going to thread it in just over those middle two. And then we're going to come down, and there's the little three, the little triangle. And we're going to put it in right after the first one. And then we're going to rotate the whole board 90 degrees. Now we're working on our weft. And we're just going to come around. We're going to go up to those three prongs. We are going to skip the first one, and we're going to wrap the second two. Now we're going to come back, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to miss the first one. We're going to skip the first one, and we're wrapping the second two prongs of those pins. And in this way, we're going to work back and forth across the board. And this is going to make our weft. So for those of you who are more experienced with other looms, this would be the piece that you would be working with a shuttle, going back and forth over the warp fibers. And you can see there that it can be, trying to film like this, it's much easier to do this with the pin loom sitting in your lap where you can prop it up. It can be a little bit slippery to do it on top of a tabletop like that. But you can arrive at a very workable small piece of cloth. Now we're coming to the end here, and as you can see, all the corners have slightly different pin organizations. Now here we're right there. We've got three pins. We're going over the last two, and now we're going up to our corner, and you watch carefully. You can see that I'm putting it in between those last two, and we're going to rotate again. We're going to rotate back 90 degrees, and now we're going to work a second layer of warp. And you can see it's just slightly offset, so we go in between those two top pins. And now when we're working at the bottom, we're capturing, you can see those first two, and we're missing the last one. So we are wrapping the first two pins, and we're skipping over the last pin. And you can see as we work this second layer of warp back and forth, you can see how those two layers are just slightly offset by one pin. And that's going to help us out later when we work the last section of weft, because that's going to allow us to go in and out of those stitches, and it will look and feel a little bit more like you're weaving. But what's nice about working on these pin looms and having this double layer of warp with the weft already, the one layer of weft already put in there, is that you get, in the end, a fairly robust little piece of fabric. And there are larger pin looms that you can use to make bigger pieces of fabric, and you can wrap them all together to make bigger pieces. Now here we are at this last corner, and we are cutting in there. We are getting those first two pins. Now we're coming down to this corner, and you can see right there we've got the three little pins, the little triangle of pins, and here we're going to stop for just a second, and I'm going to break this, and I'm going to change out and add a different color, so when we come back and do that last layer of the woven weft, you'll be able to see it. Now, to figure out how much yarn I need to use, you can wrap the yarn 5 times around the frame, and this will give us a very close approximation of the amount of yarn that we will need. This is just like the handiest little trick. Though it does not always quite want to cooperate with you. But the yellow will make it easier for us to see how the final layer of the weaving goes in and out of the stitches that we've already made. Alrighty. And once you've gone your 5 wraps around, then you can go ahead and cut. And you'll want to take it off so that you can, use it and get back to those stitches. And we're going to take the other ball of yarn. Now here you can see that these stitches are, where it's laid in under tension, and it's easy to bump and have those things just come right off, but we can put it right back on. Now we're going to tie the two together, and you can cut first and tie second, or you can tie first and cut second. It really doesn't matter. At this particular time, I chose to tie first. Sometimes I think that gives me a little bit of extra leverage in case, I was to make the tails a little too short. Having that little bit of connection to the ball can make it a little bit easier, just in case you've misjudged that a bit. So now it's all tied, and now I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to take the long needle. We do this last row of the weft with a very long needle that will work in and out, just like those old loop looms, if you've used those as a kid, in and out, to make that last layer and basically weave all of these things together. This will be the row, or the pass through that creates the actual cloth. If you were to pull this off right now, you'd just have a whole bunch of string in your hand. But once we do this actual weaving round, all of these are going to come together. Now we're going to come up here close so that you can see carefully where we want to go in. Now there's this little loop here in the corner where there's those 3 pins that are together. You can see them almost in like a little triangle there right at that corner. And it can take a little bit of adjustment here. I'm trying to make sure that I have everything adjusted so that I can go in. This first row has a tendency to be just a little bit fiddly because it's close to the pins, and whenever you're doing the first or the last row and you're close to the pins, the tightness of the stitches can make it a little challenging to go in. But what I'm doing here, As you can see, I'm going in over top of the loop that is on the pins, and then I'm going to go under that first, and then over, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to catch under and over and under and over, and I am going to work that way all the way across until I have that whole row done and woven together. And this weaves all 3 layers together. And you can see now how those offset stitches create space in order to do this. We're going under and then over, under and then over. And as we get up here to the corner, it is going to get a little bit tight and a little bit tricky. Fortunately, I'm right-handed, so this works. And now we're coming out. See, right there on that corner, we are just under all 3 of those pins. And I pull it across, and you can see how that has created that first row of the weft. And see there, you can see how I came out right at those 3 pins. And now I'm looking to go back in. First, I'm going to pull down the underlying weft so that I have room to work in. As you work through these rows, it tends to push back the underlying layers. And here we're going in through those last 2. We're going to go over that set of stitches there on the left. And then we're going to come under that very first one. So we're just getting this pulled tight, and then we're going to go in over top of that first stitch. Then we're going to go under and then over and under and then over and then under and over. And we're going to work just like we did the last one all the way across. And you can see that these stitches will line up in opposition to the row before, and when we get it all the way through and we pull that needle across, you'll see that offset between the stitches. So we continue over and then under and over all the way across. It's just basic plain weave, because all we're trying to do is make a cloth, which, you could use this for a patch or chain these together to make multiples. And now we're here at the corner, and again, this is a little bit challenging as the stitches get tight as you get to the end, and it's harder to move the needle up and down. Particularly for me, I'm not left-handed, but I'm working this with my left hand so that it's easier to see. If I was working this on my lap, I'd probably flip it upside down and do it with my right hand. But I'm going to use a little tool here, and that's going to help me just make it over those last few stitches. So you can see, and we're coming out just underneath those 3 pins. So over top of the triangle of pins at the bottom corner and underneath those 3. And we're going to pull it all the way through. And you can see how we're creating that pattern. It's easier to see with the contrast color. It comes all the way across. Now we're going to move down that weft strand that had gotten pushed up, as happens when we do our stitches, and we'll do the next row. And we'll continue going back and forth all the way through across each one of these weft, again going over and under. We're always starting in the same way. We're going to go over and then under that first stitch, and you want to make sure that you catch it. Just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And again, it will come out right underneath those 3 pins. As we work through the middle portion of this, it's all the same. And you can see that we moved over. When we came through, we move up 2 pins. That's where we start, where that one, the prior weft strand is popping out, and we just go in between those 2 pins to work across. And here we are getting to the end. Again, it's okay to go in there with your fingers and, or a little tool just to help get those last couple rows. They can be tricky on the little pin looms. And pull through, and there you go. And we're just going to keep right on doing that until we get to the end. Let's get that tight. And make sure any of our tails are not getting caught up in what we're working on. And we repeat the process. Okay, we're just going to use the magic of video here to go through the rest of these rows. We're working the weft back and forth, pushing down the prior rows, doing our stitches, and we're just going to continue here, row after row. Amazing speed there, look at that. And we're going to stop just as we get to the last few rows and go over those slowly so that you can see how to finish it up. Because as we get to the end of the frame, the addition of the weft in and out there tends to make that area pretty tight. So here we go. Now we're going to slow down here. We're going to go over these last few rows. I find it very helpful at this point, to be using both hands to make sure that I can get the needle in and out of all of those stitches, particularly when I'm, working with my offhand or my non-dominant hand. This is, really tricky to get things to work out in the right place. And you can see where I'm having to push down that needle just because the other rows have gotten tight, which is what you want. And you do want a balance there. If you get it too tight, you can make it so that you cannot quite get the other final weft rows in. So you want to make sure as you're putting down your original warp and weft layers that you don't get too tight. Otherwise this can get a bit impossible. But you also want it to be snug enough that once you take it off the frame that it's all going to hold together well, and it's going to be a robust sort of fabric. You don't want it to be really gauzy, unless that's what you want. So we're getting in this second to last right side weft row. We're getting up to the end, and again this is pretty tight and challenging. You can see here I'm having to massage those things through, but we're still coming out. We're still drawing the needle out just below the 3 pins. So same placement all the way up. Now we've got 2.5 rows to finish. We're pulling down, making that space, making that room. Getting in there, going over and then under those first 2 stitches, or strands, I guess, warp strands. That might be more accurate. And we're just going across, just going up and down, over and under. And we're within 2 rows of having this complete. And if you've done everything correctly, once we get these last 2 rows in, this will seal the fabric so you can lift it off and it's not going to unravel. If we were to try and lift it off without doing these last 2 rows right now, this would unravel on us, at least partly, if not entirely. And that's why it is important to make sure, sometimes mistakes happen in the middle, but if we have got those ending stitches right there at the front and the back correctly over and under, then we're going to make a firm, complete fabric. Alrighty. Now this is going to be the last right side row, and then the final row is going to be way up there at the top. So here we go. And you see I am working over and under, and then over, and then under, and we're going to go. This is relatively straightforward, but again, at this point, the stitches are pretty tight on the frame. And we're just working solidly across. Sometimes you have to massage that end to get it to go fully through, and making sure that it has the placement that you want it to have. And we're just coming up to those last few stitches. And we're going to come out, you can see the little triangle there of pins in the corner. That is actually 4 pins instead of the 3 that you see on some of the other corners of the pin loom. And we're pulling all of that through, and now we're going to go and pull down that last row and give ourselves space, because we're going to be working right up against those pins at the top. And now we're going to go into that corner. I'm going to try and adjust it here so you can see exactly where we're going in. Right there. That's where we want to start in. We're going to go over the top, so we are over the top of those last 2 pins, and it could be a little tricky to kind of see what's going on there, so feel free to take your time. You want to go over and under, catching all of those stitches. We're just going to go all the way across, going over and under, and it's very important on this row that we make sure that we do not slip or miss any of those weft rows, because this will be the row that stabilizes the final end of the fabric. So we're going to go up and down, still going across, making sure to go over and under. Some of those pin areas are going to be a little bit tight, but you should be able to massage it. Feel free to get in there with your opposing hand and push down and hold the stitches till you get across. And this is totally normal. Again, if you find that you are way too tight when you get to this point, it may make more sense to put on your warp and weft your first 2 or your first 3 iterations over the board more loosely. Okay, now we're coming up right to the very end there, trying to get up and over on those last stitches, and we're just going to might need a little bit of extra help to get through there. I'm trying to massage those warp strands so that we get through, turning it upside down because I'm right-handed and this just makes it so much easier. All right, yeah, we're going to get our little extra tool in there just to make sure that we're not splitting the yarn. You know, if we hold it down, if we're in danger of that, we can just hold it down and come through without splitting the yarn, because we don't want to split the yarn. And just pushing through now. And we've got it. And we'll draw that last weft strand through firmly, and there we have it. And you can just lift it up slowly from, you know, push it up from all sides on the pins and lift it off, and we have a stable, usable piece of cloth, woven cloth. And off it comes. There we go. Look at that. Woven cloth. Perfect. Firm, not stretchy, just as you'd expect. There we go. All done.